Thank you, thank you. Hello, as you can see, it's a bit of an odd title. Sleeping is not your best friend in automation, so let's get started. Oh, this helps. So who am I? Just a bit of a bio. I work for Pronto Software Limited. I've been there forever, and about 13 years, but it's only been the past 5 that I've actually been working with Selenium and automation. My boss said to me one day, about 6 years ago, do you want to play with the Selenium IDE? And I said, yeah, great. And then I had to go to my desk and Google, what is Selenium IDE? So yeah, I'm a bit of a Selenium groupie now. I just love it, and it's probably been the best thing I've ever done. And so the company I work for, we're like an ERP company, so we have 1,700 customers, 55,000 users. They use one comprehensive system to run their business. So the type of things that I have been automating, our primary focus has been web-based UI. So this web interface provides a real-time connection between our Pronto database and the browser. So you can imagine our ERP's been for a long time, so all of a sudden we had thousands and thousands of screens presenting as web pages. So my job has been to test the web UI functionality and also train our entire QA team to write tests using Selenium for their business logic. And also this year, I dabbled into the world of Appium and developed a framework for one of our apps, and that was a lot of fun. Today, how are you going to stay awake? You can't fall asleep. I'm going to have some colourful slides with a bit of a SpongeBob theme. And for those of you that don't know who SpongeBob is, he's a yellow sponge that's very annoying, but he is highly educational in the world of test automation. Maybe not. He's not going? Oh, good, he's gone. The title of my talk comes from a quote from a book by Jules Verne, who wrote a book called The Steam House, and his character at the time was called Captain Hood, and he likened sleep to a friend that keeps us waiting, and that's true, isn't it? When we sleep, it keeps us waiting. So I want to kick off with 2 questions, a bit of a quiz. What sleeps for 20 hours a day? I'll give you a clue. It's cute and furry, yes, but it's Australian. Yeah. Yes, a koala. A koala does sleep for 20 hours a day because they have this really horrible, rubbish diet of gum leaves. Ooh, come back, Mr. Koala. And he eats all these gum leaves and he has to slow down his metabolism to conserve energy. So you could say for a koala, sleeping is essential. Another question. Just have to go through the koalas again. I'm having problems, sorry. Okay. What sleeps for 10 seconds before logging on? Well, a random script that I found on the internet. I hope it's not yours, because I don't know why you have a 10-second sleep in there, but should the modern day technical tester be using sleeps? So for the next 35, 40 minutes, that's what I'll be talking about. And just to summarise, I'm going to share with you some pineapple wisdom. And SpongeBob lives in a pineapple under the sea, as you know, and he's going to teach us something important about automating elements. This is not happening. I'm going to just use my trackpad. So are we going to talk about sleep? Is it your friend? What does the communities have to say about sleeps? Why do we put sleeps in? After all, we're only human. What are some new attitudes that we need to take on to avoid this bad practice? And some convenient examples of how to wait, and some challenges that I had with sleeps. First of all, how do we define a sleep? Well, whatever you want to call it, It's suspending your test for a fixed period of time with no negotiation. Is that friendly? Well, what does the Selenium community have to say? When you look around and read, someone described sleep as an automation killer. Someone else described it as a big hammer. And just a quote from Source Lab's blog, a guy named Suhas said, the more we use sleep, the more we defer solving the real problem. And I think that's really true. So what about the two Davids? We have Burnsies, David Burns from Mozilla, and he writes books, you know what he's like. He's Selenium committer and the like. And this is my 2012 edition of Selenium 2 testing tools, which will be worth a lot on eBay soon. He said sleeps don't make our tests run as possible. So that's a bit of a no-brainer, isn't it? The other David, Dave Hefner, he writes that newsletter, Elemental Selenium. Hopefully you subscribe to that. He also is an author of books as well, currently working on Selenium IDE at Applitools. So if you listen to this webinar that he had I think it was about a year ago, called Proven Method to Grading Selenium Tests. Do you remember that? Yeah. He said you start off with a test and you give it 100 points. And then you deduct certain bad practices from the total to get your grade of that test at the end. And hard-coded sleeps were considered a deduction of -5 per sleep. So that would really, if you use sleeps, you're in trouble. And of course, Selenium headquarters, we have to go to the mothership. What do they say? They said, thread sleep is the worst case of an explicit weight. And of course, I'm talking in this talk about using explicit weights, aren't I? So we've slashed and trashed sleeps, and we know they're not recommended, but how do they actually affect our test performance and reliability? Well, there's 3 ways. They're unreliable. We often know that the sleeps we put in may not actually be long enough. I'm having trouble with the animations, but that's okay. Inefficient. We know that often we want to run our tests at premium speed, don't we? We want to get a quick turnaround for reporting on successful builds. And also they're inaccurate. They don't tell the truth. So what have we learnt? Sleeps don't really add value. So what do we need to do? We need to have a new mindset, a new attitude. This is New York City at night. As you can see, it's the city that never sleeps, like the song New York, New York says. So perhaps we can sing at our office the script that never sleeps, be resolved to cultivate tests that never, ever sleep. And also too, in the SpongeBob cartoon, there's an evil guy called Plankton, and he has a single-minded purpose to destroy things. So perhaps we should be a little bit evil and think, okay, I'm going to exterminate my sleeps. But first of all, a bit of psychology. We are human, and you may relate to some of these emotions that I'm going to present to you. Can you guess any of these expressions? The first one, where do we start? Maybe you're a tester that's not an experienced programmer and you don't know how to proceed without using a sleep. Or perhaps you're a bit apathetic and you don't care, you're a bit whatever. Or you could be just very busy, because we're in these agile environments, aren't we, where we've got scrums and we've got design meetings and UX, and I could go on forever. But our goal is to be a technical tester, proficient. We've got to think about the consequences of using sleeps and make the time in ourselves and in our tests, invest in quality. So what's our goal? Trying to keep our Selenium code in sync with the browser or the page state. So we need to know when our elements are telling us that they are ready. I'm ready. Yes. He's gorgeous but annoying. He's telling you he's ready, right? Just like an element should be able to tell you that it's ready. And if you probably noticed, every time he says I'm ready, he's in a different place. He's in a different position. So our elements are the same. They're like moving targets. So thank goodness for what Selenium provides. It provides us with weights, and we can use also expected conditions. It's a great start. So hopefully you've all at least used WebDriver wait. This is an example, of course, of where we wait for an alert to be present within a 10-second timeout. Fluent waits, of course, they're very elegant and they're lovely. They have timeouts, they have polling, they also have exceptions you might want to ignore. And then also you can create your own expected conditions if you like. You can create functions such as this one, which waits until an element is enabled or not disabled. And I had a sticky beak at the IDE code last week, and I wanted to just take a perv in their code base, and I noticed they have this function called wait for element, which they use every time they do a click or a send key, a type or select command. It waits for the element to be at least located, and as well you could add your own specific waits as well. But of course we are provided with very convenient methods, expected conditions, which are a great way to start. And if you're a Java or Python sort of person, you can use the convenience methods there. And here's an example. Wait until an element be clickable. And that waits for three things, doesn't it? That the element is not null, that it's visible, and it's not disabled. So that's all well and good and cool, but sometimes the standard expected conditions may not suit our entire needs. We may need to add more, or perhaps you don't use Java or Python. But there's no excuse really. I don't use these languages, but I know they have rich APIs, they have excellent wait modules, and .NET deprecated the expected conditions recently, but you know that's in a package manager now. So there's really, even with these languages, and please speak to the gurus here today who use these languages, if you have problems with waiting for things. Sometimes you need to also do more. You need to perhaps define your own expected condition, a custom built type of thing. So here's an example where I have a text area element, and instead of hello world, I'm typing in hello bikini bottom. If you don't know what that is, that's where SpongeBob lives. And anyway, I'm waiting for the value, or sorry, the text area to contain a value within 5 seconds. So you define your own. I'm going to quickly run through the common everyday waits that we and some of the expected conditions that we have, just before I go into my personal challenges. We have, of course, our first section of visibility, elements that are, we wait for them to be visible and for their contents to be visible. So I have an example here of an element that is an input element, but when it's closed, it's actually present, but it's hidden. It's not consuming space. So you could use expected conditions present, but also the attribute contains hidden. Or you could use a specific CSS locator to define that hidden element if you wanted. Don't need to use a sleep in that case. Waiting for a visible element, or here's an example of selecting a year drop-down. You can define your own function that waits for it to be visible, and that's basically just element is displayed. Also, invisible. Sometimes, the page may change and an icon will disappear, and you might want to check that it's not there. What would you wait for? Well, you would wait for it to be invisible or not displayed. A mobile test example of having a drop-down menu where you want to select an option. And here is an example of one of our applications where we select a different company and it changes the entire data set. So when I tap on the company, the company name in the white bit will change. So what am I doing? I'm waiting for the text to contain a value that I want. So I don't need to use a sleep to wait for everything to change. I'm just waiting for that text to be there. Same thing with text value, really. Even wherever you go, whether you're using a web app or whether you're using a mobile app, what's telling you that it's ready when you perhaps increase a quantity? Well, I'm waiting for my text value to change from 1 to 2. And in that wait function, I just wait for text to be present in element value. Attributes are something that we often need to wait for as well, because a lot of things change, like borders, styles, colours, backgrounds. Here's an example of where I want to change a colour from blue to safety orange. I don't need to use a half-second sleep to wait for that. I can just click on the colour that I want and wait for a style to change to contain a particular RGB value. So I know my element, I know my attribute, and I know the colour that's going to change. And it's very slow. And so I could use a function or in expected condition, attribute contains a particular RGB colour. Clickability. We all like to click the red button. Here's an example of a context menu. If you have a custom context menu like we do, you want those options, you want to wait for them to be enabled, which means basically they're just not disabled. Again, you could use the expected condition element to be clickable, or you could do your own function that waits for a lot more. Do you wait for things that you expect them to be disabled? So here's an example of I'm waiting for a checkbox to be disabled. So I have a disabled function at where I work. I have to use a disabled a function that tests for 3 things. One of 3 things is the class got a disabled value. Does it have a disabled attribute? That's true. Or does it have a read-only attribute? Because even though I've raised for some changes in our system to be consistent, sometimes I need to check any of those 3 things to see if my element is disabled. When you click radio buttons or checkboxes, do you wait for them to be selected? You don't need to use a sleep. So I have a click and wait policy that I always try to teach the other staff in our QA team. If you're going to use a mouse event, wait for something to happen. And of course, it's very simple, isn't it? It's just checking the checked attribute is true, and the code is wait until the element is selected. This one is, I think, important when we are often tabbing through or entering into input fields. We want to know that which element we're currently on in focus, or the active element. This is the element that's saying I'm ready. So in my application, I might have a method that waits for an input field, such as postcode. And what I wait for is for it to be the active element, for it to be displayed, and we have a waiting field class value as well that we really need to check in our system. So I raved on for a few minutes about some very simple examples, but what the gist of this is do you have a toolkit? Do you have a list of functions or methods or whatever language you're using? Can you apply these to any element, anywhere, so you don't need to use sleeps? So thank you for enduring that forever. But now it's time for a new TV show, Mishmack Sleep Rants. SpongeBob SquarePants. Sorry. I need the pirate to sing it. Okay, I've had some challenges along the way and I just wanted to share them, to vent. When I first started automating with Selenium, really I couldn't handle transitions and animations very well. We had a particular scenario where a card or what we call a program slides down and I couldn't click on it while it was animating. So here's a program that I threw together with SpongeBob buttons. It's not in our ERP, don't worry. As you can see, I don't know if you saw that with it slid down. Anyway, hopefully it did. But I needed something to tell me when the animation was over. So I went and had a bit of a whinge to the developers. And within one agile sprint, our agile sprint's about 2 weeks, they added something for me, something called animation over to the card content. And I was like, yeah, thank you. That makes my job easy. And so you can see the parent-child element tied together here. The card content actually had the animation over. So I was really into Welsh XPaths at one time. I love XPaths, but most people at my work can't read them. So I just defined with simple CSS the parent and the child. The child was the one with animation over. And so I used the just everyday garden variety expected conditions, that the parent was visible, child was visible, and the number of parents was 1. Did something happen? Okay. So whatever card or program that we navigate to in our system, I use the one method to do that, and it waits for the animation to be over. So no sleeps required, no guessing. What's the moral of the story? Well, I have a lead developer in our development team that is a Selenium champion. He said to me, without Selenium, we would not have this web UI. I'm tearing up, sorry. I just really touched me because he really believes in the value of the Selenium tests that we do, and he's really keen for the entire team to make sure that we have a testable product. So cultivate the value of Selenium to your development team today. This is the next episode, the mystery of the unclickable element. Here we have a scenario where a window or a form comes down, you click save or you click cancel, and the window or the modal drifts off, and you go to click on another element. And don't you wish you had $1 for every time you saw this? Element not clickable at point, but a hint. Another element would receive the click. So in this case, what it was that the element I wanted to click, I couldn't because there was something in that modal that was still the clickable element at that point. So I just decided that I want to check that my window or my modal is stale or invisible. I want to absolutely guarantee that it's gone. So instead of a 1-second sleep, within 200 milliseconds perhaps, I have a solution where I click save, I wait for the particular form or modal to be invisible, and then my element is ready for the click, ready to receive the click. So you can see there that all I was using was an expected condition and visibility of. The element was no longer there. So sometimes I find adding stability to our tests is checking for elements to not be there, and no sleeps required. This is an animation story with a pain factor multiplied by 1,000, and what it was is I had widgets on a workspace with lots of sales information, charts and the like, and I wanted to click on a bar graph to drill down, but I couldn't because the bars were expanding. Everything was moving when it was loading on the page, and this is a video, and I hope the video works, of what it looks like. So I've slowed it down a bit, but you can see that there's spinners and there's expansions, and it would probably set off someone's epilepsy, I think. Anyway, the first thing I tried was, okay, I'll wait for the spinners to be gone, So I located my spinner, had my spinner locator, and I used stock standard number of elements to be 0, but that still didn't work. And then I thought, okay, I'm going to wait for the animation or the animated charts to no longer be there. So I waited for the number of animated charts to be 0. That still didn't work. And then I thought, okay, what I'll do is I'll wait for the number of, which is pretty much the same thing, wait for the number of charts that are not animated to be 6. I've expected 6 widgets there that were not animated, but still didn't work. And then I put a 1 second sleep in my process and forgot about it for a year. This is a really, really bad example, I'm sorry. But I'm honest, I'm telling you the truth, I forgot. Came back to it when a girl highlighted to me, but Michelle, you use sleeps. Where? I think I knew what the problem was. The bars were still expanding, of course, and I couldn't click on them. But when? Well, SVG, Scalable Vector Graphics, beautiful XPaths. I just identified one of the bars, and then I thought, okay, I'm just going to print to the console 15 times the class, and I'm just going to see what happens. Then I was so happy. I saw this magic unicorn class value called expanded. It just appeared out of nowhere. I couldn't find it when I was inspecting, so that was great. I knew now what to look for. So I identified the particular bar with its class of expanded, and I waited for the presence of all elements located by, and it works a treat. I removed my sleep and removed my shame. But there's probably lots of things you could do. You could wait for, I think there's a lot of help out there now how to wait for transitions, checking when positions and offsets change. You can do a lot there. But the moral of this story is that sometimes you need to study a little deeper the element behaviours and not give up and not leave it for a year. That would be good. This is my last episode, the Terminal Sleep Fest Mutiny. For some strange reason, we have a Unix terminal that appears in our web browser application, and you can type text at the command prompts, but how do you wait for the prompts, and how do you know what you entered in the terminal was okay? So have you all heard of dog shaming? This is my boss. He didn't mind posing. I went away, and I came back, and of course I did a little search for sleeps in the Q18 tests, and there they all were, these sleeps. It was a sleep fest, and I said, "It's a shame I didn't teach you those bad behaviours, my child." So here's an example of what you could type into a Unix terminal, and this is an example of what he did. He put sleep, 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 sleep. And I can't remember how long it went on for, but yeah, it was lots of sleeps. So I just said, okay, well, why don't we just look at the DOM? I'm sure it's not that hard. And of course it wasn't. They're all div elements. And I noticed that the div text was prefixed with shell 0.4.1. I could identify all of the, any given prompt using the div. And all I had to do was just create a method that would wait for text to be present, so I knew whether I was at prompt 1 or 2 or 3. And of course his code was more, shaved off seconds of waiting for, you could even wait for text at each prompt, or you could wait for just the shell 4.1. So it was perfect, no sleeps. So sometimes it's just a very simple solution, but you need to look, don't be scared. So whatever inspection tools that you use, don't be afraid to use them, to get to know your elements a little better. I think sometimes that's good, to dig a bit deeper, because sometimes solution's just a very simple wait and no sleeps. And just as a bit of a extra bit to the story, a few weeks ago there was a spanner thrown in the works where something changed with that terminal. We're going through another software release, another version, and the terminal looked exactly the same, but the developers used a different solution to present that terminal. They used something called xterm.js, which is a terminal front-end component, and the text area doesn't actually show you any of the content. So I couldn't see, it was almost like an image, I couldn't see what was being typed in the terminal. So a quick fix that we did was that after entering the terminal commands, we didn't need sleep, so I just captured a screenshot, I converted it to grayscale, I used an OCR to extract the characters, and then I asserted that the characters that we had typed were correct. And it works 99% of the time. Not perfect, and I obviously need some visual testing tools, but it didn't need sleeps. So I've gone through some fascinating episodes of my new TV series. So what are your goals when you get back to work? Well, hopefully your goals will be determined to destroy sleeps. They are not your friends. And to learn how your elements are saying to you, I'm ready. I'm ready. So thank you, everybody, for listening today. Thank you to the Selenium committee, the audience. Thank you. And I'll be at the office hours. Come and say hi. I'm a bit shy, so please just come over and say hello. So enjoy the rest of the conference.